Well, you're live, and this is Coffee with Kim and Our Voice. And so tonight, I am so excited to be with you. I have been busy the last couple days getting a couple of things together, so very excited to share those things with you tonight. And we have a lot to talk about because there is never a dull moment under the Trump administration. And the recent squad escalation has added a lot of interesting dynamics to U.S.-Israel relations. So we want you to know that Coffee with Kim is centered around U.S.-Israel relations. And we are just beginning to launch our new group and movement called Our Voice, and we want you to be a part of it because we are collectively coming together for such a time as this, really a time where we just can't let one side have a voice. We have to be able to articulate what we feel is right and just, and we want to articulate the American voice and the Israeli voice and the collective U.S.-Israel voice, and make sure that it's heard. So this is Our Voice, and so we're glad you're with us tonight because we are going to be talking about some very, very important developments and issues concerning U.S.-Israel relations. I also want to know, want all of our Patreon members to know that I recorded the most amazing interview yesterday that is going to be available for Patreons only. So if you're not a Patreon, make sure you check out our page on Coffee with Kim or the link that will be available after this video on this site. But yesterday I had the immense opportunity of talking to probably about a fifth, sixth generation family individual here in Israel, in Haifa, a very prominent family name, and a family that originally in the 1800s settled in Hebron and were part of the massacre that did take place by the Arabs that nobody ever talks about. In fact, that's been in the news, the fact that Omar and Tlaib are not talking about the true history of what took place in Hebron. So this is that side of it, but you are not going to want to miss that interview because this is a man who stepped outside of the boundaries of his Haredi religion and faith to marry a woman that was at the time not Jewish, and how God turned his whole life around through that event is an incredible story. And so you are going to want to you're going to want to watch that. So make sure you check out our Patreon program. For those of you that become Patreon members, we have special live interviews, and we have special interviews for Patreons. Then we also have special live interviews that you can get invited to as well, depending on the tier. So with that, okay, Patreon perks, folks. All right, so thank you so much. So tonight I want to begin with the headlines of today's paper in the Jerusalem Post, and that is Trump clarifies, I meant Jews are disloyal to Israel, not the U.S. And that is probably one of the most important statements an individual with the influence of President Trump can make. He said they're disloyal to Israel, not disloyal to the U.S. Now, one of the biggest struggles that historians have regarding the Holocaust is this conundrum that was taking place in Germany with Jews that had assimilated into the culture. They saw themselves as Germans first, and then Jews. And many that had really assimilated saw themselves as Germans, period, and not Jews. And so what began to happen is, because they saw themselves as Germans, they were loyal, fiercely loyal to Germany and to the German government, and ultimately to Hitler. Fiercely loyal. And so they played a role in sending their fellow Jews to the gas chambers. Now, I'm making a very broad, summarizing statement, so I don't want you to pick that statement apart. It's a broad statement. There's a lot of details, and yes, I have a lot of Holocaust education, all right? A partial degree, not partial, actually, my degree in Jewish history. I have a degree in Jewish studies. I also have a degree in history, and it is Jewish history. So Holocaust history primarily. So this is an area that when we look at the broad spectrum, I've written quite a bit about the rise of Hitler and the ideology of Hitler, and the Mischling, which is the half and the quarter Jew, because I come on that side of my family from a Mischling family in Germany. So it's been a very, very strong interest to me to study this out. So what we see is that those Jews that were loyal to Germany were not loyal to two things. They were, well, I could say three things, okay? They were not loyal to their Jewish identity. They were not loyal to their Jewish brethren. And they were not loyal to the messianic dream of the re-establishment of the nation of Israel. So those three things are vital to understand when Trump is talking about Jews being disloyal to Israel. That does not mean they're not good U.S. citizens, but maybe they're a little bit too U.S. citizens, all right? They have assimilated in their thinking so much into the American culture that they have lost their edge in what it means to be a Jew, in what it means to be a covenant Jew with the land and with the people. That's identity. That's responsibility. And when you begin to try to find a way to appease your enemy in the country that you're living in as a Jew, and this is what happened in Germany, you are going to find yourself on a very, very slippery slope. And this is what the president, in many ways, was really clarifying when he clarifies, I meant Jews are disloyal to Israel. You have, of course, George Soros, Jewish, who has immense amounts of networks through the Open Society Foundation that are all of his organizations, at least I think at least 154. The last time I wrote my piece on this, there was 154 organizations in the U.S. alone that were supported by the Open Society Foundation, all anti-Israel. On the global market, the NGOs right here in Israel, he supports some of the most anti-Israel organizations, pro-Palestinian, pro-anti-Israel voice organizations, and he's Jewish. All right? So this is a problem. Bernie Sanders, he's Jewish, and he is vehemently anti-Israel, even though he will say he's not anti-Israel, he's all about, justice for the Palestinians. That's what he'll say. But I will tell you, that's a problem, because you are shoring up your constituency base on a lie, on an absolute lie. You are playing with the emotions of people, and you're not doing it in context with history, in context with your identity, and in context with the truth. And when that is happening, the people are being deceived. And this is Bernie Sanders. I'm not saying he's a deceptive individual, and nor am I disparaging his character. I am saying that this is what he's chosen to side with as a Jew. He's not siding with national Israel or working to solve its problems or issues in the middle of an Arab world, but he is actually even looking to potentially boycott Israel and to punish this country for having done everything that it could possibly do to work with the Palestinians to bring peace. So this is what President Trump is inherently talking about, even though these specific things may not be mentioned in what you're hearing or reading. This is what's really going on. And to actually follow that up, listen to this. You know, if you think, oh, really? Is that, you think that's really happening? Okay, so another article here. It's called, all right, you can see that there, American Jews, right? It says, feel betrayed by Netanyahu, and that's following the Omar Tlaib flip-flop. All right. Okay. So this apparently is not at this moment about Trump, but it is about Trump, because Trump was the one that tweeted that, and to Netanyahu, you shouldn't let them in the country because they're they're BDS. They're boycott, divestment, and sanction, and they are viscerally anti-Israel. They have no agenda. So I ran this whole scenario, and you know me. I'm an overly compassionate person. So you might even remember when I said, you know, well, okay, so, you know, on the compassionate side, you know, both of these women have you know, made it to become congressmen. You know, their families are going to greet them. They're going to think this is wonderful, and you know, they've actually achieved so much. And I was looking at that, and I remember running this by someone who's an expert really in this, how the Palestinian communities think in light of their work in the United States. And he said to me right after I shared my thought, he said, that is such an American viewpoint. He said, only Americans think like this. He said, they are so kind and compassionate. They're like, they always want to think the best of everybody, right? And he said, that's not at all how they think. Not even remotely. They don't care. They're not even like, oh, wow, my sister made it to Congress in the United States. He said, they don't think like that. They think agenda. They think strategic. How are we going to, you know, it's how you do it, why you do it. It's irrelevant to the way that the community thinks. It's only relevant to what they can accomplish for the cause of their community, and how they can truly maximize the anti-Israel and anti-American voice. And so I found that, I can't quote his words exactly, but it was very, very interesting to me. And the more he shared on the perspective and the ethos that only those that have lived in Israel, a couple generations in Israel, that understand the Arab mind when it comes to the sovereignty of Israel being in the land, they are the ones that can give this particular kind of voice. So they have an understanding of what's really going on behind the scenes. So back to our article. Hey, everybody. It says here, the American Jews feel betrayed. And this article is written by Ilanit Chernik, and it is representing the head of WIZO. Now, WIZO is a very, very strong women's organization. It's the Women's Zionist Organization in America. And so I'm going to sketchily read this. It's a very, not necessarily a short article, but very, very interesting. The subtitle for this article is WIZO head tells Post, decision to ban Congresswomen has sparked U.S. Jewish-Israeli relations emergency. And so, okay, why? Why is this now such a critical emergency? So let me just sketchily read, and we'll kind of comment along the way. It says, it's not a secret that many American Jews are Democrats. They felt that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in taking this position, has betrayed them. These were the words of Gusti Yahashua Braverman, chairwoman of the World Zionist Organization's Department of Diaspora Affairs, speaking to the Post. So she goes on to say, all right, she was speaking about the reactions she has received from American Jews following Israel's decision to ban Congresswoman Rashidi Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. The scores of heated, furious calls I have received as the head of WIZO's Department of Diaspora Affairs, and diaspora means those that live outside of the land of Israel, okay, as well as the harsh condemnations from Jewish bodies known for their unqualified support for the state of Israel, indicate that a red line has been crossed. So we're going to talk about that. In a column commenting on the matter, which she also sent to the Post, Yahashua Braverman wrote that this decision unfortunately proves yet again the Israeli government insensitivity to the inner feelings of the second largest Jewish community in the world. Now let me just stop right there. Well, let me read on and then I'll stop. It says, it seems that at this point the Israeli motto, don't be just, better be smart, did not guide the decision makers in the state of Israel concerning the Congresswomen. Well, let me just say this. First of all, there's only one country that Prime Minister Netanyahu and the citizens of Israel need to be concerned about, and that's this country. The Jews that are outside of the land are actually, technically, all right, they are outside of the Israeli, they're outside of the Israeli ethos, the Israeli, not just voice, but the Israeli conscience, the mindset of Israel, the thinking of Israel, how Israel operates. And we're going to get into that even a little bit more in just a minute. And not only that, according to the Torah, all right, in the end of days, where are they supposed to be living? Where are they supposed to be? They're not supposed to be in the diaspora. They're supposed to be here. So it's a very, very difficult and very fine line when you're living in an area where you really shouldn't be living to begin with if you're Jewish. And then you start to tell the Israeli government how they should be running their country and what they should be doing to appease the Jews that are living outside of the country. This, to me, is a very, very, very fine line, All right, we are appreciative. I know in America, we are very, very appreciative for the Jewish community in America. It's a very, very vital, important community, and America has been a safe haven for the Jews and played a crucial role in the development of our nation. However, it's time to come home. And so that also is very relevant to this uprising and story, because what you begin to see, and let me go now to the page where this article continues, all right? Turn this, because now what you're beginning to see is exactly what you started to see in Germany. And that's when the German Jews were so German that they started siding with the enemies of the Jews. And this is what we are seeing right now with the issue of Omar and Tlaib. When you are Jewish and you start siding with those that are calling for the annihilation of Jews, and you are working to forward their voice, to further their voice, this is a slippery slope that could end in catastrophic ways, like it did in Germany. So let me read a lot on about that in this article, Betrayed. All right. Okay. So, I have to pick up the very end to run. It says, when the Congresswoman announced their plans to visit the Jewish state, Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, all right, said that Israel would allow the two BDS supporting leaders, boycott, divestment, and sanction, to enter the country despite a 2017 law that would allow Israel to ban them. Now, recently, the leader of the BDS movement was banned from coming into the country. So, you know, Israel is not a country that is known a lot of times to have a double standard. In this country, the law is the law. And there's not a lot. I'm not saying it never happens, but I'm telling you, it's not a common occurrence in the country. And so, so it goes on to say, however, in a move that appeared to be pressured by U.S. President Donald Trump, Israel reversed its position and said that it would not admit them. The move, said Braverman, caused immense damage to the image of the State of Israel among the general public and the Jewish community in the United States in particular. Now, what's interesting is what she says next. She acknowledged that the refusal of entry to persons advocating boycotting Israel and thus calling for our destruction is a fundamental right that we have as a state, okay? In fact, Israel is not the first country to do so, and she cites all these other countries that have not allowed people that wanted to destroy them in the country, all right, trying to kind of make this look like, this is like a global issue, okay, not just something that the Jews face, but everybody faces, okay. And then she goes on, all right, to say Netanyahu is the prime minister not only of Israel, but of the entire Jewish people. We need to be smarter than this. We know that they are biased. Everyone knows that. And she added, referring to Omar and Tlaib, pro-boycott sentiments. But by allowing them into the country, we could have presented another face of Israel. Now, that was my argument. It wasn't necessarily my position. But when I was looking at both sides of how this could go, I said, this is what we could do on the one side, this is what would happen on the other side. So looking at it objectively, this was a possibility. Well, I talked to some experts in that area, and that was the first correction that they made in this case, because these women were not even going to be coming to Israel. In other words, they weren't coming to, or at all coming into areas that are quote unquote Israel. They were only going into the areas that were that of Palestinian communities. So it would be very, very difficult to change their perspective if you don't even have the opportunity to talk to them. So this is a very way of American thinking. You know, we don't live, Americans haven't lived with this situation for 70 years, right? We think as Americans. And I thought the same way, and I was corrected by an Israeli. Said that's not how they think, that's not what they're going to do, and it's not their agenda. And we will not be able to influence them, but they will be able to influence others against us. And so very, very interesting how we always think like this as Americans. You know, we really have that American voice, that American ethos, you know, John Wayne, you know, we're going to win. This is all going to turn out for the good, and amazingly wonderful things are going to happen. And as much as I love that, sometimes we just have to face the reality of a situation. So she goes on to say the decision also damaged a lot of the work the Jewish Democrats have been doing to present Israel in a good way. Israel's decision to bar Tlaib and Omar pulled the rug from under the feet of Jewish Democrats. Now, remember that there are a lot of very, very supportive, Israel-supportive Jewish Democrats. However, they're very egalitarian. They do not have the best interest always of this country in their mind. Okay, they have the best interest according to the American perspective. So what's interesting, though, is the fact that they have been working to present Israel in a good way, like Israel is a bad, you know, like Israel is a bad country, right? And I know that propaganda is like that. But I think that's wonderful, the way that they have been working so hard to let those that have a voice, an anti-Israel voice at epic proportions, speak. Unbelievable. Yeah, that is putting Israel in. We just give voice to everybody, to anybody. Whoa, okay. So, anyways, she goes on to say, let's see, sorry. Yeah, and just this will be the last thing I say about this. At the end of the day, Netanyahu is playing a dangerous game on our backs, the backs of both Israelis and the Jewish community, precisely now when a tremendous effort is made within the Jewish community to maintain bipartisan support for Israel. The Israeli government's decision to take part in internal U.S. struggles and side with Republicans against Democrats, when many of its supporters and members of the Jewish community is no less than a kesas seli, which is an act that justifies war. Wow. This inconceivable reality forced Jewish federations and organizations to come out publicly and firmly against the Israeli government. Now, you must understand, a lot of people ask me all the time, why are the Jews in Israel in America so liberal? I mean, they fight for everything that the Torah is against. I mean, they fight for abortion. They fight for, they advocate for gay rights. They advocate for all the things that we find here in Israel. Even if we allow these things, it's with this understanding that the Torah is the center, the ways of God. And let me just take that from the words, the Torah, the government of God that is established in the first 5 books of the Bible and then lived out and expounded upon through Jewish sources and through the prophets and through the writings of the scriptures, that it has a lot of principles. It has a lot of statutes. It has a lot of laws. It also has a very, very strong way of creating a just and righteous society. And remember what David wrote when he said about praying for Israel. He said, if you're going to pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They that do so, all right, will prosper. Now, what does that mean? Well, when you understand that the only road to peace is righteousness, that is the connection to peace, all right? It says that righteousness is what produces peace. So if that indeed is the case, then when you pray for the peace of Jerusalem, you're going to pray for the righteousness of Jerusalem. You're going to pray for it to constantly, and its government, to allow the hand of Hashem, the hand of God, to move it in a direction that produces that which is right. That's what righteousness is. It is not only something that comes from God, but it's something that also causes our actions to produce that which is right. All right? And so this is what Israel, this is so many fundamental aspects of Israel. In America, on the other hand, we have in the Democratic Party and those that have sided with the liberal, and especially the most destructive element of the progressive left, all right, that's the social communist element. They have no regard for God whatsoever. None. Zilch. These are the people that have been fighting to get the 10 Commandments removed from the public square, that have been fighting to remove everything that's Christian and everything that's Jewish from the public square. These are the people that are trying to turn the country into a nihilistic country, a country that is void without God. And yet these are the people that are criticizing the country of God, which is Israel. So we better be careful here about how we actually look at the statement that President Trump makes and the decision that they collectively made together about barring them. I'm not saying I agree with that decision or don't agree. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that we understand that this decision had a lot more to do with the ethos of this country, the way it thinks, the way that it is legally structured, all right, and the way that we are constantly dealing with enemies, and how are we going to deter our enemies so we can build a nation, so that we can actually do something constructive instead of constantly fighting enemies. This is something the American Jewish community doesn't understand. They try to understand, but they don't, because they're always fighting for some human rights. They're not really fighting for this nation and that which is just and true. They're fighting for what they think is the freedoms that an American democracy is supposed to give to individuals. And in part, that's very noble, it's very good. On the other side, it can be very destructive. So that's my take on that. It was a long take on that. And let me see who's with us tonight. Let me see if I can see. Rachel, it's so good to see you. All right, here you are. All right, Benjamin, so good to see you. Francis Brock, so good to see you tonight. Lila, hey girl. Amanda, so good to see you. Kevin, always good to see you. Diana, great to see you. All right, we have Christina, it's so good to see you too. Patty, hey girl. Oh, my dearest friends. All right, Cindy Barnes, so good to see you today. All right, Gina, so good to see you. And Renee, so good to see you. Juan, it's awesome. Judy, always good to see you. Rosie, thank you so much. Rosie, what do you say there? Hope you come through soon. What am I coming? Oh, I'm not sure what I'm coming through, Rosie. All right. Oh, it says here, we've got a storm here. Oh, okay. You had a storm, so your internet was down and you were hoping that we came through. Okay, great. All right, Crystal, hey, thank you so much. And Mary, it's so good to see all of you, Mary and Lionel and Benjamin. So great to have all of you with us today. And wow, we have already been on almost an hour and I haven't even touched the surface. Okay, so how's everybody doing tonight? You doing all right? It's so good. Are you enjoying the view? I'm enjoying actually sitting out here, and talking to you, hoping to get on a little bit earlier. Interesting. Let me just highlight a couple of other articles. And I think I've really kind of covered much of what's been in the paper, but look at this. All right, Danny Danon talking to the United Nations, Ramallah seeking to destroy Israel. Very, very interesting article. I'll have to talk to Linda. We'll have to get this up. What's interesting about this is, first of all, let me just highlight a couple things in it. Danny Danon, again, what's resurging in the rhetoric in the UN, in the United States, is this whole concept that Zionism is racist, which Zionism has nothing to do with racism. Zionism is a concept that has saved the Jewish people, united the Jewish people, and been the formidable force in bringing this nation back into existence with the help of God. Zionism is really an ideology. It is the ethos of this country, in that this is the country that belongs to the Jews, and that ultimately God is going to reign from Zion. All right, for out of Zion will come the Torah, and it says in the end of days that it will come, that the whole world will come to seek there's a scripture I actually want to quote right there, but I'm going to give a generality. It says, for out of Zion will go forth the word of the Lord, right? And then it also says that in the last days that 10 nations, the nations will take hold of the skirt of him who is a Jew, and they will say, we will go with you, for we know that God is with you. All of this is centered around Zionism. And so we've just seen there's so much development. The history of Zionism is one of the most fascinating walks of understanding that you could ever learn. I'll have to probably do a class on that, just so you can, oh my gosh, it's just amazing. Even the first Zionist Congress didn't just happen. It started with a man named Leon Pinsker in Russia, and how that came to be through Theodore Herzl, and then slowly on to Chaim Weizmann, and slowly here to Ben Gurion and becoming a nation. I mean, what a story, what a love story, if you ever wanted to hear one. So Danny Danon, the ambassador to the UN, and also I believe he's the co-chair, he represents this ideal. And so he fights for it when he's in the UN, because the UN is the very antithesis, and so is the Palestinian ambassador, the very antithesis of what it means to be the nation of Israel, to be Israeli, and also to have a Zionist ideal. And so he talks about this despicable language exposes the Palestinian Authority anti-Semitism as it continues to incite hatred among its people against Jews in the Jewish state. True. There you go. It's just true. Both Tehran and Ramallah's extremism are increasingly at odds with the growing sentiment among Arabs that Israel is and will continue to be a part of the region. So now we see this, and we've been talking a lot about this divide among the Arabs, Tehran, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, all siding against Israel, and then all these other Arab countries wanting to work with Israel. So very interesting development over the last 10 years. All right, especially since the Trump administration. So he says this. He says, just 2 weeks ago, the Islamic Republic announced that it is increasing its financial backing of Hamas from 6 million to 30 million a month. I bet that's not in the news in America, huh? All right. Tlaib and Omar aren't telling you that side of the story, are they? All right? Okay, that's a little bit of terrorism going on, wouldn't you say? Okay. And then he said, Tehran is succeeding in one key respect, bringing Israel closer to its Arab neighbors. So he's saying the more Iran tries to fund the Palestinians, incite and create this baseless hatred against Israel, the closer Israel is getting to all of the other Arab neighbors. So it's having a very positive effect in Israeli-Arab relations in this region. He then goes on to say, an unprecedented wave of normalization is sweeping the region. Normalization is stabilization. That means that normal relations are developing instead of constant tension. So he says, as Israel continues to develop and improve relations with our Arab neighbors, the foundation of that new relationship is the understanding that Israel has a right to sovereignty. He continued, except for the Palestinian leadership, which is one of the few regional governments that does not want to forge ties with Israel. As I sit here, the Palestinian leadership has yet to recognize this historic right. On the contrary, they keep denying the Jewish historical connection to the land of Israel and our right to sovereignty. They denounce this ambition as racism. So this is an excellent article, because then you go on to hear the Palestinian side, all right, where they go back through the same old mantra. Our state of life is all the Israelis' fault. They're the demons. The only solution is the two-state solution. We've worked very hard to have a two-state solution that Israel doesn't want. Oh, God. We only have access to 22% of the land. I remember Prime Minister Barak offering them 98% of the West Bank, and they refused it. But that doesn't matter. So you hear the rhetoric publicly at the Security Council meeting, calling Danan a liar, calling him, said Danan was also lying when he said that the Palestinians were not interested in peace or the two-state solution. Of course they're not. They never have been. And then it says he recalled that they had already given up the bulk of what they had considered to be historic Palestine. Well, there is no historic Palestine. As I said earlier, if you're one of our patron, if you're part of our patron program for our projects here, and you can start becoming a patron for $3, but if you give $9 a month or higher, you get access to our interviews. And I just interviewed a man. What a story. It's going up for the patrons, and I will tell you, this story, he lays it out because his family was here since 1812. And he tells you exactly who was here in the land. He'll tell you even the Hebron massacre. He said that the Palestinians weren't even in the 1800s. They weren't even here. This was the Arabs that murdered and massacred those that were in Hebron at that time. And he talks about this unbelievable development of this narrative, which has no foundational truth. And this is the narrative. Remember, Palestine was named, the country was named Palestine by the Romans after the destruction of the temple, after the Jews were kicked out. All right? There were no Palestinians there whatsoever. So here they've got this whole narrative that they have created about historic Palestine, which was Roman. All right. So anyways, you know, you just go crazy listening to this stuff. Anyways, there you go. So, but very good article. We'll put it up in Coffee with Kim. So if you're not a member with Coffee with Kim and you're watching this, you've got to be. That link will be up below this video. So make sure you check back on this video once it gets posted, reposted. All right. Now, two amazing articles, but because I've talked about this so much already tonight, wow, these are good. We'll put them up on Coffee with Kim. Making the right decision. And this was very much how I stand. It wasn't, it wasn't that one decision of letting them in or not letting them in was going to be better than the other, but it definitely talks about the ethos, the understanding of the Israeli conscience, how Israelis think, and the decisions that have to be made because, and this was probably one of the most powerful statements that this writer said, all right? The bottom line, she said, is, or it might be, yeah. Actually, I'm not sure if it's a man or a woman, by the way. The name is used for both. All right, the bottom line is, Israel has only one option, and that is to do the right thing regardless of the inevitable throwback or blowback, all right? And she also says here, the only answer to the question, and this is the question, all right, what factors and variables should the democratic state of Israel, the only Jewish state in the world, utilize in making these kinds of decisions, like the decisions with Omar and Tlaib, right? And she says the only answer, and this is what I just said, with a lot more words than this, but Israel must make decisions that are best for Israel, that are best for Israel's defense, and that is always deterrence of problems that can come in the future, and that Israel must also act justly. That is a command from God, that we do justly and we show mercy. So it says here, these two issues, defense and justice, are often symbiotic. So, this understanding of how they work together is really very, very, very strong in this country. Unlike any country in the world, we understand these two, the symbiosis of defense and justice. And wow. It's really powerful, and it's fascinating to watch. So this was one article, excellent article. And the other one is the double-edged sword of Omar and Tlaib. So it's the, it's kind of the, your I can't say these words. I know the words that people usually say, you're D if you don't, you're D if you do, all right? You're S if you do, you're S if you don't. These are things people a lot of say. I can't say it. So you're messed up if you do it, you're messed up if you don't, or you're totally screwed, as they say. If you do it, you're not. But the thing is, a couple of very important points that are brought out here. They go from the one side to the other hand. They contrast the situation very, very well. And it says, perhaps ignoring the visit of the congresswomen and waiting patiently for the world to forget about the visit of these fringe politicians would have been the right things to do. On the other hand, these women are declared anti-Semites who were up to no good. And that is so true. Their itinerary contained no meetings with any Israelis. Even if they have tough questions for Israel, they were not looking for answers, but simply to embarrass and humiliate the Jewish state. And that is the reality. Before that was ever written. The other interesting thing, now I am part of AIPAC, but I have a very difficult time with AIPAC at times, because AIPAC often has this very progressive liberal stream running through it. It doesn't hold true with all the members, but there's this stream that is very, very much on the side of the Democratic side, but they're never what worry me. It's the fact that the Democratic Party has removed itself from the American ethos, the American collective conscience, the American voice, the American way, the way we think, and they have gone in the direction of global elitism. They have a global view which America is not a part of, except for the fact that it's going to be the way that it's a platform for their voice. So they have truly defected from the American way, the American value system. The American value system is a very, very strong, righteous value system. They have strayed very, very far from that, and they've adopted more of a European Union, a Nietzschean value system, where everybody has their own values and everybody should live according to their own values. Forget God, forget country. It's all about no borders, no identity. We all mesh together and we all sing Kumbaya in the end. All right? So that's how it is. So AIPAC really came out very strongly against Israel in this decision, and that's going to come back to bite them. Let me tell you something. And so I'll just read one comment on that. AIPAC's decision to give legitimacy to Israel's critics by scolding Israel for not permitting Tlaib and Omar into the country was incorrect, even though it was understandable. That's right. And so very, very interesting articles. We'll have to put those up. And the last thing How's everybody doing? All right, let's see who also has joined us. All right, Shane, it's so good to see you. And Renee, great to see you. Mare, hey girl, good to see you. All right, Rosie, what are you saying there? You said, yes, okay, great, all right. And then Steph, Mare's on, Steph's on. Folks, for those of you that don't know why I go crazy when I see Steph and Mare, it's just because we go back so far. You know, Mare and I go back probably to, we were 5 years old, to kindergarten, and Stephanie, we go back to when we were teens, so we go way, way back. So that's why I get so crazy when they're on. I love them. All right, and old friends. And then this here, Stephen and Lisa. Okay, so good. It says they don't even have Israel on Arab maps. Isn't that just the most perfect statement? Is that it's true. The Palestinian, when the Palestinians give a narrative and they show a map, Israel doesn't exist. And this is so true with the Arab world. Very, very good point. Excellent statement. Also, it says, hi Kim, NC, North Carolina, USA, keep up the great work. Don't stop refuting these lies. Yes, exactly. Jerry, all right, and Shelly, hey Shelly. All right, great to see you, Shelly. Mare's on, Shelly's on, all right. Okay, so, all right, great. Okay, guys, all right. And then, okay, so they're all talking to each other. All right, so last thing I'm going to mention was something that I just, see if I had to, it's in the other one, hold on. It's in this one. This was really, really interesting. So the Likud party, you know, we're getting ready for elections, and I said I promised you guys I'll talk about elections, you know, maybe one show in a couple weeks, closer to the election. It's very complicated here. I don't want to drag, you know, it's like you don't want to drag your country's you know, dirt through the gutter. You know, there's just so much going on with the elections here, and primarily what you've got now is a brand new party that's arising called the Blue and White Party, led technically by Benny Gantz. You have the Likud party that has been the primary dominating party now for a long time, and it's to the right. Okay, it's a fundamentally conservative Torah base, but not a religious, but it has a lot of religious a coalition. They join coalitions of right, central, even left central, and also far right. Okay, but the Likud has been the predominant party, and then you also have what's called the new Yamina party with Ayelet Shachid and Bennett rising to the forefront, and it is definitely that party. See how many seats they get in this next election. However, the Likud is in trouble. There's been some real developments, and I think because they've made choices, they didn't, Ayelet Shachid really did want to be working with the Likud party. They didn't accept her. The Likud has been, especially with the new party that's risen up, Likud is finding itself being kind of marginalized, which it hasn't for a long time. So there's a new woman on the line with Likud, and her name happens to be Mary Regev. And she is out, they have, you know, a bus, and they're campaigning throughout the country, okay? And she's out in the forefront. And her message is this. Her message is, in God, well, this is the way they wrote it, in God Regev trusts, to deliver Likud. That's the way they wrote the article. But her message is this: my help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. Now she's quoting one of the Tehillim. She's quoting one of the Psalms, all right, where King David says, I will lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh, all right, from, it says, Adonai, the Lord, all right, maker of heaven and earth, okay? So this is what she's quoting from. And she goes on to say, this statement appears to be culture and sports minister Mary Regev's new political strategy as she tours the country canvassing the votes ahead of the September 17th election. All right. So last weekend, Regev, who is not religiously observant, she's not religious at all. And that's what I've shared with this before, but that's what's so unique about this country. You don't have to be religious to be someone who has deep, deep faith in Hashem, faith in God, right? You can be as secular as they come here, because secular is different here too. Secular is not like it is in America. So we think through American eyes. But here in Israel, if you're on the left or you're on the right, it just means which position do you stand for concerning the Palestinian situation. It's not like left in necessarily ideology and right in ideology. It's a very different way of thinking. So in this country, all right, you can go to the most secular events and they will be talking about the Bible and they'll be talking about God. And that is unheard of. But everybody, it doesn't matter what you do in this country, God gets mentioned, and so does the Bible, so does the Torah, all right? It doesn't matter what side you're on and what your position of faith is. He is central to the very ethos of this country, the way this country thinks. And so she says this. Have you heard someone say this in recent years? Listen to this. Last weekend, Regev, who is not religiously observant, said that God alone decides elections. OMG. Wow. Did she nail it or what? To have the chutzpah, to have the courage to come out and say, you know what, folks, these elections are not about us here in the state of Israel. It's about who God wants in office. That's what this is all about. So she went on to say, all right, on Sunday, she declared her pride in both Jewish heritage and to be one who kisses mezuzot. In other words, the mezuzah is it's a symbol of your faithfulness to the nation and to God. All right, and that's a whole nother lesson on the mezuzah. It's really powerful because God does say, you know, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And then he goes on to say, and you shall love your neighbor. Ve'ahavta et Adonai you know, because I'm talking to you, I usually I rattle it all off. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'kol avavecha v'kol vadecha. You shall love your neighbor as yourself, and you shall love the Lord your God, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So, anyways, in that case, okay, she is saying, "This is who I am." And so she also talks about the issues. I mean, this woman has made some major changes, even in her thinking, which is so representative of what's happening in this country as it continues to move to the right. She was probably in the forefront of wanting the egalitarian a spot at the wall, and now she's changed her mind on that, because the more you get to know God, the more you start to really dig in, there are just some things that you understand that in Israel are holy. And you don't want to mess with them. You don't want to mess with them. And so you start to find yourself really identifying with those things which are holy, which are just, which are true. All right, so it's very cool. She's been a real strong supporter of keeping the Shabbat and stopping all of the work on Shabbat. Very, very important, because if you know your Jewish history, you would know that not keeping the Shabbat is one of the reasons people got kicked out of the country, or the nation got kicked out of the country. So you know that's something you really want to always be mindful of. So she's really been very, very centric in her identification with the voice of this nation. And she is not afraid to say it. So the last thing I'll say is Regev's copious reference to God in the lathering of her public comments and appeals to Jewish tradition and identity is a functioning of her strategy. So I like her strategy. I like the fact that a politician is not ashamed to say, you know what, I'm here because of Hashem. I'm here because of God, and He's the one that's going to decide the outcome, and we're just going to be His hands and voice in the meantime in trying to rally our support for the party that we are a part of. So I thought that was very, very cool. What do you think about that? What do you think? Do you think it's refreshing to hear someone actually acknowledge the fact that God is involved in elections? He is. I mean, the Torah says, He is the one that raises up and He's the one that puts down. You can never hold a position of any importance in the world if Hashem's not in it. You just can't do it. It's the way it works, and it would be work a lot better if people would recognize that, because then they would understand who they're actually having to honor and who they're actually having to please and who they're actually having to fear, instead of hobnobbing with all the people that don't make any difference in the long term of decision making. So anyways, Elaine, it's so good to see you. And Angela, great to see you. Alma, yeah, it's you. Alma, good to see you. All right, so this is what we're talking about today. So anyways, it's been really, really nice. We've been on for sure for an hour. So I'm going to let you guys go. It's a beautiful evening here in Jerusalem. And make sure I'll put that link up too. Make sure you check out our Airbnb, that you can come and stay here and be a part of what we've got going. And for those of you that are part of the Patreon program to help support not only Coffee with Kim, but our voice and our movement in our voice, and the interviews and the things that the books and the papers and everything that we are in the process of doing, your support is very, very needed and helpful. But just know, when you support a couple of the upper tiers, those you get what's called pillow points. If you don't know what pillow points are, that means for every $125 you give, you actually get a free night of accommodations. So you can earn that by a $50 a month donation, $100, $108 a month donation. We do it according to 18, multiples of 18, because that's life. So when you give, you're actually getting pillow points. And right now we have a special that when you become part of the Patreon program, you get a tree planted here in Israel in your name, and that is just our gift to you for supporting our projects and our voice here in Israel, and what we're going to be doing here in Israel and in America. And I'm very, very excited to let you know that I just got accepted in the beginning throes of the doctoral program, so that is in the works right now. That happened all yesterday. So much happened yesterday that I have been working towards for over a year, trying to get some things in motion to stay here and to live here and to be here and to be a part of this. And a lot of that came together yesterday. It was pretty amazing. So, and I want to thank every one of you for your support, for being here when I'm online, for your giving. Oh my gosh, so many of you have just gone above and beyond, and I want to thank you so much. You have truly, the last 2 months when we've been shifting platforms here, your support has been overwhelming for me. I just cannot thank you enough that you have entrusted me with this great responsibility, and that you're a part of it, and that we're doing it together. And I really appreciate it, and I really deeply, deeply appreciate it. And I love you so much. And we just had a few people. Thanks, Mir. Thank you so much. I'll tell you a little bit more about it a little bit later. Buddy, it is so good to see you, buddy. Jeanette, my friend from France. So good to see you, Jeanette. All right, Elaine. Jeanette, when are you coming to Israel? All right. Hold on, guys. Got to get you back. All right. Okay. And Angela Hams, so good to see you. All right, everybody. So thanks so much. Great things. I'll share more about that later, but right now, it's been a long night. So I will talk to you later, and thank you again. Love y'all. All right, and check out, not right now, when I repost this, okay, check out the links below, or all those links are in Coffee with Kim, so you can go and check that out too. All right, we'll talk to you soon. God bless. Bye-bye.